Feels like an uphill battle when you have to convince dumb people of clear things.
We never call them dumb.
I do.
You know,
It's a blessing if your biggest barrier is education. If that's the barrier, but the technology isn't the barrier, man.
The biggest objection that we were encountering at the time from our potential customers was can't run a parking garage from the cloud. If you have a Microsoft problem, we're the organization that can help you implement it, integrate it, build on top of it. We had this .com bubble burst, and within 6 months, we lost half of our clients.
Then we go into the 08 collapse.
And over the next 10 years, we became the #1 Microsoft partner in the world.
And you sold the company in 2013?
Yep.
So you had a 20-year period where you went through 2 recessions. What are the things that you would do today that you didn't do during those times to safeguard yourself for a recession?
Well, #1 is
Sam Goodner, you are a man of many talents. You've got several entrepreneurial journeys under your belt. Catapult Systems was probably the largest Microsoft systems integrator company, 450 employees, 10 offices. You built that out over time, sold it. You also spun out a bunch of other companies through that journey that I want to dig into. But you also built Flash Parking to $100 million in revenue, $1 billion valuation, crazy stuff. Most recently, you wrote a book, Like Clockwork, Run Your Business with Swiss Army Precision.
Love it.
Welcome to Beyond a Million.
Thanks, Brad. Good to be here.
Awesome, man. Well, I want to talk about a lot of things, specifically the journey in spinning out all these companies. But let's start with running a business like Clockwork. In practice, what are the tenets of that? What does that mean for somebody in execution when they're growing a business?
Like most entrepreneurs, when I got started, I knew nothing about running a business. And you just kind of get started, like you did, I'm sure. And you just kind of, figure things out along the way. But at some point you realize that at a certain size, you're the bottleneck for scaling your company any further because you're in the middle of every decision, which is great. It's heroic. All entrepreneurs kind of start that way. But if you want to be stuck at 3 million, stick with that. If you want to scale a business into it running without you being in the middle of every decision and hiring, it's about, hiring the right people and building the right systems around them and in your organization so it can scale without you in the middle of every decision. So that's what I mean.
You know what's funny about that is literally my next question that I've written down is many founders keep themselves at the center of everything. What are the most critical steps for making yourself irrelevant in your own business so it can scale without you?
Yeah. So that's it. I mean,
well, give me like the framework. So if you're a founder and you need to get out of things, let's start with what the sort of categories of tasks are or departments. And obviously this varies from company to company, but
it does.
Let's use yours as an example. What were the core things that you were stuck in the middle of that you worked yourself out of?
If you want to scale any business, it starts with sales, period. If you don't have revenue growth, there's no need to scale any other part of your business. That doesn't matter. And so focusing on how do I scale my sales organization or even build one, that's always step one, in my opinion. And the best tools around that is if you want to have anyone other than yourself out there selling without you in the room with them, then you have to build a sales playbook. You actually have to understand and codify, all right, who are we going after? What's our message? Who specifically, not only the type of industry, the size and all of that, but who is a decision maker in that company and how do you get in front of them? What objections are you going to hear over and over again? How do you overcome them? What does a good opening email or phone call look like? All the way down to how do you close that business? If you don't actually put that in a playbook and write it down, then you can't actually go hire another salesperson, let alone build a sales team that can go out there and deliver that without you. So for me, it starts with sales. The other one, and I know many of your guests on this podcast always talk about, you can't build an organization without great talent, obviously. And so starting to think through a real process for how do I recruit, interview, hire, onboard talent, and how do I make that more repeatable?
Mm-hmm.
And what exactly am I looking for? Like just recently you had had Robert Glazer on talking about core values
mm-hmm.
and doing values-based interviewing. Couldn't agree more, by the way. to actually put that in place and understand what your core values are and what you're looking for in a candidate, and then systematizing that, super important. So phase 2 is that. And then you start looking at all the other parts of your business. So that now it's business specific, right? So at Flash Parking, for example, we go out and install parking systems in garages and surface lots across the country. And that was a big bottleneck initially when I joined the company. Like, they did not know how to do that at scale at all. I mean, the founder was still going off and drilling holes in garages.
How big was the company when you jumped in?
Oh, it was tiny. I was looking for a startup that I could either buy or invest in and then join full-time to help scale. I looked at, over the course of a year, my first retirement, I became an angel investor. I looked at over 100 companies. And then I met the young founder of this company, Juan Rodriguez. Great young guy, great entrepreneur. But they were stuck. They were stuck at 3 million, had been stuck there for 3 years. They had 12 employees. They had built this amazing, platform in an industry that was still stuck in the 1990s. And they just didn't know how to get it to the next level. So they needed some investment capital, and some gray hair that I could provide both. So I took down their whole round, put myself on the team as president, left Juan as the CEO, and then we proceeded to go implement all the things I talk about in the book, just one at a time. So in that case, I'll get back to, operational scaling. A big, problem that they were facing was, how do we go, God forbid we sell it, how do we go actually install and implement this and support this and even manufacture this at scale? And the way we did that was, we cheated. Now that we had investment capital, I went and hired a full-on delivery team from the whole implementation team from a friend of mine's old company called Site Control. My friend Dan Sharplin, put him on the board of directors of Flash. Actually, he co-invested with me in the deal. And his whole operations team that now worked at Siemens, we hired the entire team on day one that we closed our round.
Crazy.
And they had been doing this for 15 years at scale, different industry, sort of different design brief, but they knew how to do this at scale, how to create a design brief to go turn what could be a 3-month project into 3 days or even 1 day at scale through third-party contractors and installers to really, broaden our reach. Once we did that, we were doing things in the industry that were simply impossible before.
Well, that's a pitch. So that's a hell of a pitch for bringing on smart money, right? So there's this constant conversation in my head of bootstrap versus funded. And as a bootstrap entrepreneur that has gotten to where I am without taking on capital, I tend to lean in the direction of bootstrap. Now, that said, were I to start over, I almost certainly would bring on capital to grow faster. But be at some phase, in many phases, like I have friends that have bootstrapped to, 10, 20, 50, 80 million, and then brought on a bunch of money to grow. And in my head, I've always thought, what the fuck? Like, why would you do that at that phase once you have built stability? But you just gave a really good answer, which is you can compress timeframes to bring on that system immediately instead of figuring it out yourself.
So let me be clear. My nature is bootstrapping, period. All the companies until Flash, I'd always bootstrapped, took no investment, and was in complete control of our destiny. Flash Parking was the first time we went and, I invested at that scale in a company. And then we went on to raise more money a few years later to go really, really big. It is a compromise, and it is a decision you should make very deliberately. Anytime I sit down with a young entrepreneur at Capital Factory, where I mentor, for example, and they're raising money, my first question is, why are you raising money? Do you need to raise money? You've never raised money. You're building a services-based business where you're cash flow positive pretty much from day one. Tell me exactly why you want to go raise money. Yeah, maybe there's a good reason. I want to hear it from them. I want to hear if they've really thought it through, because as soon as you raise money, you now have a partner at the table that has very strong opinions on where you should take your business. And you better have a plan for an exit, because as an angel investor, I'm not investing in your business unless you have a plan for an exit. I'm not trying to fund your lifestyle business. Mm-hmm. By the way, there's nothing wrong with a lifestyle business. Mm-hmm. You want to build a lifestyle business and cash flow it and build a great culture and have a great team and grow it organically over 10, 20, 30 years. amazing.
Yeah.
Go do that.
Just don't conflate the two.
If there's a market opportunity that you cannot take advantage of without moving at blitzkrieg speed, then you might have to go raise money for that.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're building a drug company, a product company, anything that requires a whole bunch of R&D up front, you're going to have to raise money, obviously. But there are plenty of businesses, probably most businesses in this country, don't need to raise any kind of capital to build and to grow and to be successful.
Yes, yeah, particularly today,
Yeah.
with how much easier it is to execute.
100%.
Yeah. Well, so I guess one of the lessons with flash parking then, and just to be clear with flash parking, when I haven't dug into the company, but
Yeah.
the label
Yeah.
indicates to me that you are creating a different way to pay for parking automatically. Automated systems to pay for parking.
All of it. I mean, we build ERP for parking operators and asset owners that own parking garages and lots, and we do valet parking, event parking. So if you've entered a parking lot with a QR code, or if it's scanned your license plate and opened the gate automatically, if you've bought parking on Ticketmaster, for example, that's all our underlying technology.
Awesome.
We also have the hardware that goes, in the field that still is required in some cases to pull a ticket, use a credit card, if you don't want to use your mobile phone. So we do all of it. But when we came, on the market, parking was still stuck in the 1990s.
Oh yeah.
The biggest objection that I had to overcome, I invested in 2016. So put yourself now in 2016. The biggest objection that we were encountering at the time from our potential customers was, you know what? We've been told you can't run a parking garage from the cloud. I think that, credit card processing fees are just not going to work. The gate's not open in time. We're going to have backup in traffic.
Crazy.
That was the objection. Our competitors, who all back then required a rack of computer servers in the back of the garage to run their systems, had convinced the entire industry we were stuck in the 90s. So
interesting.
Yeah, that was it was a fun thing to overcome.
Well, that's also it's an interesting element of a million industries, which is, I think that on a lot of levels, when you're an entrepreneur, you look at objections like that and you think, fuck, what a pain in the ass. Well, first of all, what are you talking about? Second, what a pain in the ass. This is hard, but it's a blessing if your biggest barrier is education in a lot of ways, right? If that's the barrier, but the technology isn't the barrier,
right?
Man, now it feels like an uphill battle.
It's still a barrier. You have to overcome. Yeah,
feels like an uphill battle when you have to convince dumb people of clear things.
We never call them dumb. They're just,
I do.
They just haven't been educated yet. So we built
ignorant, obviously.
We devised this strategy. We called it cloud conversion therapy.
Nice.
Where for customers we needed to bring over that decision line, we would invite them to come visit us in Austin. So they would fly in. I would pick them up with the co-founder of the business, the CEO, Juan, in my Tesla Model X. So first of all, many of them had never driven an electric car back then, let alone, one with Falcon Wing doors. And then everything from that entire day was carefully curated, starting with, we're driving my Tesla, which opens up the conversation to, it's connected to the cloud. I get updates in, over the air, real time. I get new features every month without having to bring them to the shop or any mechanic coming to the store.
Strong.
Then we would, casually drive by downtown Austin to get to our offices. And I would say, hey, by the way, that most of the garages in Austin, of course, run our technology. Would you guys, like to drive through a few garages before going to the R&D lab? Well, not a customer in the right mind would say no to that. Well, we had carefully curated the route. It looked random. Nothing was random, right? We had gone and made sure that everything worked that day before. And by the way, we don't own any of these facilities. We don't operate them. We just have our technology there. But we would even pick up trash ahead of time to make sure everything looked great. And we drove through this carefully pre-planned route where in some cases I'd enter with the QR code. The other time they would read my license plate. I would pay with my mobile phone. It went in and out smoothly. Then we got to the R&D lab. We had our best product manager, of course, present all the latest capabilities of the product right there in the lab, anticipating every possible scenario that they could bring up. We'd then order in Rudy's barbecue, of course, for lunch, always Rudy's. We'd have our head of AI come and show him all the futuristic stuff we were working on. Then we'd drive him out to our manufacturing facility in Dripping Springs, big 30,000 square foot warehouse. Every assembly line was manned, perfectly, groomed. All the inventory racks were full. They got the tour from the head of manufacturing telling them about our supply chain logistics and all that. By the time they got back to the airport at the end of the day, it's like they felt like they came from the future. 100% of the customers we brought through that program ended up becoming customers. Prospects to customers. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful example. A whole bunch of things there pop out. One is from the beginning, the Tesla. And I think that when you think about practical application in other areas of sales or your client experience, it's an analogy, right?
Yes.
That's it. And if you're doing the storytelling pitch, you're giving them a third-party data point that completely reinforces your sale, your pitch. And that's just a hilariously beautiful example of that. The other big one for me in general is that the client experience is going to happen. Either you're going to control it or you're going to have a bunch of miscellaneous stuff intervene into the process that's going to distort it from what you actually want. So if you don't take the time to clearly define what that client experience is going to be, then it's going to be a whole bunch of stuff for different people.
Yeah. The lesson here is leave nothing to chance.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. 100% is pretty good batting average.
Yeah.
1,000, I guess, if we're doing sports analogies.
Fair enough.
All right, let me back out here because one of the cool things about your journey is that Catapult Systems went through 2 major recessions, and truth of life is that humanity seems to go in cycles, and the economy certainly goes in cycles. They're not always the same, but they have a lot of similarities and a lot of lessons can be pulled. So you started Catapult in, and I think that this is relevant because we're going into a pretty gray, murky hallway towards superintelligence.
Yeah.
And we have no way to know what's going to happen there. And so listening to the journey through these different cycles of recession and challenge, the ups and downs, is incredibly applicable. Now, the environment's different, the technology's different, but the lessons should proliferate here.
Yeah. In fact, I have a whole chapter in my book on recession-proofing your business, which is probably the most difficult thing to do. And I start by quoting the Stark family from Game of Thrones, which is winter is coming.
Yeah.
When I first started Catapult, I was 26. It was 1993. I had never lived through a recession as a professional, right? The last one happened maybe when I was in college or high school. And I was writing the tech boom of the 90s.
Yeah.
And we had the internet, we had Y2K.
Well, let me tee this up. Because, so for framework and for just so people can think about size and scope here, you started Catapult in 1993?
Yes.
Crazy, right? So you started in 93 for people that weren't born at that point in time.
Most of your audience.
Yes, some of them for sure.
Right.
The internet functionally didn't exist at that point in time. In the .com, the first wave of the internet starting was 98, 99, where it actually started to be commercialized. So like e-commerce was around then. The world collapsed. That whole industry collapsed. And it wasn't until, 03, 04, 05.
03.
Yeah, we started to see like real, where I was going was where we started to see real e-commerce happen.
Yes.
Right? And so we got out of the recession in 03, but at 04, 05, 06, 07, we started to see Web 2.0 and e-com. Then we go into the 08 collapse, which is real estate focused. And you sold the company in 2013?
Yep.
Great. So you had a 20-year period where you went through 2 recessions. And that framework, I think, is really important for people to see because you went through all these waves, but also there's a tremendous parallel between the rise of the internet and the rise of AI.
I think you're right, actually.
So tell me how how Catapult Systems started, and tell me what a systems integration company is for Microsoft in the first place.
So I had 2 co-founding partners, and our vision was, again, we were young and didn't know any better. We just wanted to start a company. We didn't exactly know what kind. All 3 of us had technical backgrounds. I'm a computer science, major from college. And our dream was to build a software product company. Like, that's what we knew. It didn't take an advanced degree in accounting to realize, well, we need funding for that. And we didn't have any. The entire sum totals of our savings was $17,000 that we put in the bank. So we didn't have enough money. And this is before you could go raise money from venture capital. So that wasn't even on the table for us. So we figured, well, we know a lot about building this thing called client server systems. This is from mainframe computers, this big migration from mainframe to client server. I bet companies would pay us to help them figure that out. So none of us came from a consulting background, that we accidentally created a consulting company with the goal was, and we're going to take all of the proceeds from that business and self-fund all these different product ideas that we have. And eventually that's going to be where we go. And it's exactly what we did. We started basically selling our services to clients who were willing to pay for us. We started growing that business. We took all the cash flow from that, started incubating different ideas. Our first product was called Advanced Power Tools and a product called PowerDoc. Then we created our flagship product, Inquisit, in 1997. It actually was a big hit and became its own company that we spun off as a wholly owned subsidiary. It had a successful exit 10 years later. But along the way, we had accidentally built this services company or an IT consulting company. Now, back then, we weren't focused on Microsoft at all. We would do anything for anybody. That's, by the way, part of the lesson learned there is in the 90s, when business was so good, all we had to do was find the talent. If we were good at finding, attracting, and retaining the best talent, business was falling in our lap. Suddenly, in mid-2000, as you described earlier, we had this dot-com bubble burst. And within 6 months, we lost half of our clients. Like they either went out of business or they stopped, funding IT projects. And we were left. It was, by the way, we barely survived. To be clear, I mean, we had several rounds of layoffs. We all took pay cuts. We retracted from multiple offices back into one. Like it was batten down the hatches, survive this, austerity measures. And by the way, we got lucky. The only reason we're still in business is we had created this software product company that had a recurring revenue model that was, not as cyclical as all of our other consulting clients. And the cash flow from that subsidiary, Inquisit, allowed us to weather the storm. That was an accident. Now, in the middle of this, it's 2002. We're looking around going, our consulting business looks like everyone else. Nothing sets us apart. Like we're not best in the world at anything. And when you're, when you look like that, then you have to compete on price. And so we started really doing a lot of deep dive thinking on what can we be best in the world at? How can we set ourselves apart from everybody else? What I call, what is our unfair advantage? So we looked for specialization. I've heard you say do less better in one of your podcasts. Big believer in that. And so we looked at, first of all, industry verticals.
Hold on. Yeah. You said you're a big believer in do less better, yet you made like fucking 6 software products while you had a consulting company.
Yeah.
How do those things reconcile?
Great. You want to come back to that?
Yeah, okay.
I'll come back to that. But to finish my story on focus, we first looked at any kind of vertical specialization. Like, could we become the best IT consulting firm for semiconductor manufacturers or finance and banking or government? We couldn't find a single vertical that was big enough to support our company. So we looked horizontally, like let's align ourselves with one technology provider. And the choices at the time were IBM, Oracle, or Microsoft, really, in our world. I think we could have picked any one of them, but we decided, you know what? Let's go all in on Microsoft. We like their vision. We like their partner model. And we made the very deliberate decision. We're going to, within a year, exit all non-Microsoft business. And we're going to go 100%. We're only going to hire Microsoft certified consultants. We're only going to train in Microsoft. We're only going to sell Microsoft solutions. We now have to expand from just pure custom application development to do software integration, which is going to push more Microsoft licenses for them, which is what they care about. We're going to have to expand into networking and all of the other things that Microsoft does. And that became our singular focus. And so we went from this, doing everything for everybody, to we want to be known. If I leave a conversation with you, a potential customer, I want you to remember us as Catapult Systems. You're the Microsoft consulting company. Don't call me for an IBM solution. Don't call me for anything related to Linux or anything else. If you have a Microsoft problem, if you've embraced Microsoft already, the Microsoft stack in your company, we're the organization that can help you, implement it, integrate it, build on top of it. And over the next 10 years, we became the number one Microsoft partner in the world. according to their ranking, not ours.
A parallel today would be you've got businesses that are have a whole bunch of systems, automations in place that involve humans.
Yes.
And you have an opportunity to move people with a service-based AI implementation agency, right? And say, hey, this is, if you wanted to replicate your model today, move companies into how to use AI. And then through that process, you could build software that integrated AI and potentially spin out those software companies. And to extrapolate further, and I don't think we're at a point where we've found the winners yet, but to extrapolate further, you could say, I am the open AI, or I am the Anthropic, or I am the Gemini agency, and we only focus on that AI. And I don't think that's wise right now, but that's the loose parallel to what you were doing.
By the way, great analogy.
Thanks.
100%. And just like we saw in the fallout of the .com era, you're going to have the winners and losers from the AI era. It's coming. Everybody is doing everything with AI right now. By the way, I would love to be an AI consulting firm today. They have to be on fire.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much demand. Every company has an AI initiative on the books. They don't know how to even spell AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're an AI consulting firm today, you're super busy. In terms of the winners or losers on the AI applications that everybody's building, a reckoning's coming, right? So back to the recession, I had no idea that one was coming. It hit us in the face. We got lucky in how we survived. So when we came out of it in 2003, and suddenly we had the wind in our sails, and we were moving again and opening new offices and hiring and growing 70% a year for 5 years in a row, we literally, with the executive team, we sat down and said, how do we recession-proof our business? How do we make sure that what happened to us in 2000 doesn't happen again? Because you know what? I know now it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the next one is coming. I don't know when, but it's coming. And so we took very deliberate measures to diversify the industries that we focused on, the size of the different companies, geographically as well. The types of services that we provided was beyond just custom application. It was software integration. We created a managed services part of our business that had recurring revenue. Love recurring revenue. So we found that recurring revenue model for our business. We made sure that no single customer was ever more than 5% of our total revenue. Hard, fast rule. If one customer started to get bigger, we would just slow down with that customer, because guess what? That customer can fire you next year. We made sure we always had 3 months of cash and credit, a runway. In case something happened, we always had enough financial cushion in the bank to get us to the next spot. Come 2008, 2009, 2010, seemingly a much bigger recession, the world would say.
Yeah.
We were profitable the entire time. All we did was slow down our growth. Didn't have a single layoff, no pay cuts. We came out the other end, and did great the whole time because we took preparation measures, assuming a recession was coming.
And you mentioned some, I think, great steps to safeguard yourself that, it's one of those things that I like to say I'm very good at learning from my own mistakes after I've made them a few times.
We all are.
But not great at learning from other people's.
Yeah.
But again, these things are predictable. Like you go through a recession like that, or you go through any negative impact for your business, but specifically a recession in an industry-focused recession, you can see, what was I doing that had myself so concentrated here that got in my own way? And so one of the things that's practical is to think about in what way can you safeguard your business so that maybe it's so that during a recession, all of your cash flow doesn't get crushed. And maybe it's your target market and distributing your target market. Maybe it's that you need a residual stream, right? Maybe it's, I don't know. What are the things that you would do today that you didn't do during those times to safeguard yourself for a recession?
It's different for every business. That's, first of all, the key. The important thing is to actually spend time thinking about it. If you don't spend any time thinking about it, when it happens, you're unprepared. You don't have a plan B or a plan C. One of my friends, actually, he's one of the case studies in my book on the chapter on recessions, runs a residential mortgage company.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about ups and downs.
Brutal.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you're at the whim of interest rates and all kinds of
raining cash in the good times, and it's brutal in the bad times.
And again, I'm not going to, go too deep into that, but what they found is the unsexy part of their business of actually servicing the loan is fairly recession-proof. Now, you don't make a ton of money when interest rates are low and you're selling a ton of mortgages comparatively, but suddenly when interest rates go through the roof and you're not selling as many mortgages, that loan servicing business that you just build up, that keeps cash flowing. As just one example, something I would have never thought of.
Can you help me with the financial model behind that? Because all I really know, and I know a decent amount, but like in my head, mortgages get sold all the time.
That's right.
From a servicing.
And so if you don't sell the mortgage and you actually service it yourself, you have to build up capital to do that. But you're now getting the fees for all that ongoing servicing work.
But basically, you have to have a big enough bankroll. You have to have enough cash in the back end to actually pay for the homes that you write the mortgage on. Or is it leveraged?
It's leveraged. It is leveraged, and now you're getting, of course, outside of my area of expertise. So
you're taking the spread of something.
Have Tom Rhodes. He's the founder of Sente Mortgage on your podcast.
Amazing,
an amazing entrepreneur, by the way. And he really nerds out on this stuff.
Love it.
But now you're way out of my depth already in terms of how they actually do it.
All right. So mortgage.
But the point here is
mortgage experts. Post in the comments to answer this question.
Yeah.
Explain the model for us.
It is different for every business.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to think about it. One of the exercises I had my entire executive team do once a year, regardless, was I said, okay, I want you to imagine that suddenly we lost 20% of our revenue, and I'm going to come to you and you have to cut 20% of your department in 2 weeks. I want you to come up with a plan to do that in writing, and it's not a hypothetical plan. I want you to come up with how you're going to do it, whether it's this budget, that budget, these people. I actually want real names, and I want to review the plan. And I'm going to review it, make sure you actually did the exercise, thought through it. We're going to file it and not look at it again until next year. But forcing yourself to think through what would happen and what you would have to do is a really healthy exercise, at least once a year.
Yeah, I love that. I like to think about, I've talked about this a ton of times, but I like to think about the absolute worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And you're confronted with this when you're doing any sort of investment. And so I do a bunch of real estate investment. So every time I'm buying a piece of property, I'm looking at it and thinking, how could this go horribly wrong? Right. And the truth is, the absolute worst case scenario is really not worth planning for because there are a bunch of these crazy edge cases.
Right.
So you pull it into what's the likely worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And then you have to plan for that stuff because those do happen. And if you haven't thought about it, you're fucked.
Right. We cannot plan for World War III.
Exactly.
Right. If that happens, all bets are off. We're all trying to survive.
The robot's taking over.
But what like you said, the likely worst case scenario is, what does that look like?
Yep. Yeah. So, okay. I love that. Annual contingency planning.
Yes.
With your management team, or if you're smaller.
Executive team, yeah.
Yeah, yourself.
Yeah.
Insert funny advertisement here. Or just check out Easy Pay Direct. It's epd.com/BAM, and you can find out about credit card processing for your business. Lots of our guests use us for credit card processing, and this seemed like more fun than writing a scripted ad. Okay, so let's back out to why to the idea of do less better and focus on your core thing.
Yes.
Against, let me spin up a bunch of software companies inside of my main company and roll some of those out.
Actually, the two are not mutually exclusive as long as you realize that they're completely different businesses. And I'll take quizzes as an example because they really became, our flagship product and had a successful exit. I realized very quickly, I can't use the same people. I mean, we can share, we can even share office space. We can share IT support and HR and accounting on the back end, shared services, fine. I have to have dedicated sales, dedicated marketing, dedicated R&D, dedicated support. And they need to wake up every day not worrying about Catapult Systems and what they're doing and that marketing plan and that sales approach, but how to sell Inquisit, how to market Inquisit, support Inquisit, develop, that. And so they were completely focused 100% on their mission, and Catapult remained completely focused on ours. The key is those are not the same people. Same thing for running it. I immediately hired a president to run it. So it wasn't me day to day. I mean, I had to get it started. I was the first salesperson that got it started, but then I'm very quickly finding people that are dedicated to that mission. And so the two are not mutually exclusive.
Interesting. So when you spun up these new software products inside of Catapult Systems, were they immediately their own company or just their own department within Catapult?
They were initially their own department, their own business unit. So we tracked the P&L and the expenses and all that separately. And then at one point you spin it off into its own company, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I had two other service parts of our business. One was a digital marketing agency called Sling Rock, and the other one was a mobile application development firm called Mobile Alchemy. Those were both service-based companies. Same thing. It's a very different, the kind of people you hire for a digital marketing agency, they look a lot like you, actually. They don't look as much like me. They all have Macs, and we're a Microsoft shop. Mobile application development. Microsoft completely missed the boat on the mobile phone.
Yeah.
Right? Apple came and ate their lunch. And so the whole Microsoft mobile OS went nowhere. So we couldn't have any legitimacy creating mobile applications on the Microsoft platform. So I created a different brand, different company, different focus, different tools called Mobile Alchemy to go build mobile apps on the iPhone.
Mm.
And they focused on their own, on their own thing.
How do you think about those initiatives relative to core values, directives? Are they, even though they're sort of legally and structurally a department inside of Catapult, they are their own initiative, own product, own team. Do they come to the company meetings? Do they have their own set of meetings entirely? Are they integrated to the company? What does that look like?
Well, I can only tell you how we did it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the right way or the wrong way. Culturally, we were still one big brotherhood, or sisterhood. We were one big family. Mm-hmm. And so we had monthly company meetings. They definitely came. Everybody came to the same company meeting. We all had the same core values. Eventually, if the company gets big enough and you truly spin it off and then they go into their own world, their own space, I think you then give them permission to go rethink potentially their own culture, their own core values and all of that. For us, we had tremendous energy and benefit and camaraderie from being sort of one big family. And so we kept those for the most part together, right? They were operationally different. They had their own operational meetings. They had their own planning meetings. They had their own, all of that, sales meetings, marketing meetings. That was completely separate. But culturally, we all came together and celebrated sort of the bigger fun of being part of this big family together.
Mm. Interesting.
Then I don't know if it's the right answer or not, but that's how we did it.
I'm pretty firm in my belief that there is not a right answer to most things. Yeah. There tends to be examples of highly successful people, initiatives, organizations, governments that are radically different. And so I think the path to get to a good outcome or the desired outcome is wildly different across the board.
Agreed.
But that's good to know. The question is, if you did see a successful outcome, clearly there's something to study through that path. So I like the idea. It's interesting to hear the idea of one umbrella, but operationally your own meetings, initiatives, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
In one building?
Well, at headquarters in Austin, we were in one building. We had offices all over the country, 10 offices, for the Catapult Systems part of the company. Inquisitive was all in one building. They were at one point, a different floor. We got big enough. We thought of ourselves as all being part of one family.
Mm-hmm. Love it. I want to talk about selling stuff. So you sold Catapult Systems. You also grew Flash Parking to a $1 billion valuation, which is wild. But only 20 to 30% of the companies that put themselves on the market to sell actually end up selling. Why do you think that is? And when do you think somebody should actually think about selling versus growing?
A lot of lessons learned on the M&A side. And so my numbers are, I've sold 2 companies in my lifetime, Catapult Systems and Inquisit. And in capacity at Flash, certainly in my capacity as a chief strategy officer, that role that I moved into, I bought 10. So I've sold 2, bought 10. The number one thing when I sit down with other entrepreneurs, and I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs make mistakes here, my first question for them is, okay, what is, assuming you don't have investors, because you have investors, now suddenly you have people that have an opinion on what that should look like. But let's assume you've bootstrapped your business. It's just you. What do you want to do? Is your goal to have, a financial outcome one day? And then what would you do next? And then if your goal is, no, I really want an exit, I really would like a big financial outcome from this, my question is always the same. So what is your number? And everybody's number is different. And I want you to think about, what is your number after taxes, after you've paid the stock options to your best teammates and all of that? Like, what is your number? Sit down with your spouse or your partner and think through, what number would it be worth my while to do this? Because after that, I'm just going to be a different part of my life, different phase. And once you have that number, you don't get to change it. You can maybe adjust it for inflation. I'll give you that much. But once you have that number, don't change it. Why? Because when you're grinding out through a recession and your hair's on fire and your customers are firing you and your employees are upset, that's when you want to sell your business. Like, I can't wait to get rid of this business. And that's the worst time to sell. When you're suddenly growing like crazy and you're on fire and you customers are flocking to you and your employees are happy and you're growing, that's when you don't want to sell, but that's precisely when you should sell. So my message to any entrepreneur that I mentor is, have a number. And once you can sell your business, if your goal is to sell it for that number, sell that business. And how do you sell the business? Well,
let's pause there for a second, because I think that there's a tremendous lesson there that has tons of parallels in life, but it is don't let your present emotion get in the way of your previous calculated goal.
100%.
I love
this
that.
Has to be a rational decision based in numbers and facts that you've thought through, based on the lifestyle that you want to have. And everyone is different. Everybody has a different number. I don't care what the number is. It could be $1 million, $2 million, $100 million. Your number is your number after taxes.
Yeah.
When you can hit that number, you execute, period. And if you don't, I'm going to call you out, because I've seen people go, no, I told you 20, but now we're on fire. If I wait one more year, it could be 40. And guess what? Then it's 2008 and they have to wait 7 years to get back to that number.
Or it never happens.
And I have seen it countless times, Brad.
Yep. Well, and the other thing that you said that I want to highlight is, what are you going to do next? And if the answer is not clear to you, then maybe you shouldn't fucking sell.
Again, everybody has a different answer for that.
Yeah.
Right. Some people might want to go do it again. Some people might want to retire. Some people might want to travel the world with their family, like I did for a year. There's all sorts of different reasons you might want to do this. And everybody's answer is different, but have an answer.
Yeah. I like that. Okay. So be clear on why you're doing it.
Yep.
Right. And if it is something you should do at all.
Yep.
And then the question is, how do you do it? Because I know that you just said exited 2 companies, bought 10. You're probably in the fraction of a percent with those stats. Most entrepreneurs sell a company, if they sell at all. In fact, most entrepreneurs never sell their company. So the lessons of what to do and how to do it are tremendously relevant for anybody that wants to go down this path. And knowing the failure rate of taking a business to market and actually selling it, which is, 70-80%, take it to market and never end up selling it. What are the first things you want to think about to structure something for sale or to go into that process?
A lot of parts of that answer. I'll start with one, which is, in our business, we are used to, like in your business of credit card processing, you're always the smartest guy in the room. Pretty much. In your field, in your business, we are used to being the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
You're now selling your business and you're the dumbest guy in the room because you know nothing about that process. So step number one is actually find a real advisor, whether it's an M&A, an investment bank, an M&A broker, someone to actually help you navigate this process. And yes, they're going to take a commission and they're worth every penny because they can do things that you're not qualified to do and you're doing for the first time if you're lucky. And you're going to be across the table from some head of M&A from a larger company wanting to buy your business, and they do this for a living. And they're going to eat you alive if you don't have someone in your corner to help you navigate that process. So that's number one. Number two, selling your business starts several years before you actually sell the business. You have to start thinking through, there's many ways of doing this. If you're in an industry where you already know the top 5 likely buyers of your company, for example, and a lot of companies do, then you start thinking your entire business, then your entire strategy should be around how do I align my business to be the most tasty, the most appealing business for one of these 5 potential acquirers. What is it where do I fit in? What's the puzzle that I know they're missing? And if Salesforce buys me or if Oracle buys me, I'm going to just beautifully fit this hole that they have right now. And I'm going to align my entire business around filling that hole because that's going to maximize my valuation. Not all companies have that kind of clarity of who might buy my business. I didn't. I did know that EBITDA really matters. Now, when you're a privately held company, you make enough EBITDA, you're positive. You don't necessarily care about what that number looks like as long as it's greater than 0. And some years it'll be greater than others. But really at some point, because, the faster we were growing, it was definitely burning through some EBITDA. Each time you open a new office, for me, it was $1 million investment.
Yeah.
It was $1 million of expenses before I started, I got back to waterline break even on that new office, for example. But when a company's buying you, you might think you're super strategic and I'm a multiple of revenue. Most companies that are bought in the United States are a multiple of EBITDA.
Yep.
I'm not saying there's not that rare technology company or that drug research company that doesn't have an ounce of EBITDA. Those are the exceptions though. So focusing on what does a really healthy bottom line look like in my industry compared to everybody else. And I want to be in the top 10% there if I can. So really start focusing on EBITDA several years before you want to sell. Start doing really healthy things like having audited financials, running your company as if one day you were going to be part of a public company. Just, again, not all the overhead, but really thinking through stupid things like my record keeping. Like, do I have all of my customer contracts signed and in one place? Have every one of my employees signed that employee agreement? We don't think about these things very much when we're just running the business every day as an entrepreneur that owns a business. And yet all of those things really, really matter when you start lining up your company for a sell. If you have all of your ducks in a row, you have good growth, strong EBITDA, great records, you have audited financials now for several years, it makes that entire process, first of all, and you go hire an advisor to really help through that process. And they're going to tell you up front, listen, we think realistically your business is worth X. These are the multiples we're seeing, kind of like when you go and use a real estate, broker to buy an office building. Like, I don't know what price per square foot I should buy an office building at if I'm going to buy one. I want to hire somebody that can actually help me navigate that process and help me understand, am I overpaying, underpaying? What should I buy or sell this building for? Same thing in selling your business.
So I'm glad that you used that example too, because in the case of real estate, for example, I have quite a few reps, right? I've bought dozens of things. So I have a lot of data points for it. Similarly, if I'm hiring a salesperson, I know what questions to ask. I know how to screen that person. I know what that interview process looks like. I know what the tells are, right? I do not know how to pick out an investment banker. How do you find a good person to advise you through the M&A process? Let's just go with selling.
It's a great question.
The sales process.
I interviewed 12. So, as you're running your business, you're always approached. At some point, you start making, and I'm sure you have been. You're approached by investment bankers that are like, "Hey, have you ever thought of selling your business?"
It's worse today than ever because of how solicitation happens. So today, early 2000s to early 2010s. I think spam was probably there then, but the aggressive spam from investment bankers, venture capital, et cetera, is wild.
So you can ignore all the spam, but if they get to the point where they're actually reaching out to you and calling you and want to have a meeting with you, I'm always going to take that call, even if my timing is not right. And I'm just going to file that away as, okay, I'm going to make a list over the years of companies that start surfacing in my industry as reliable, M&A bankers or brokers. And then it's a process. Like, I went and interviewed 12. I ask around people that I know in the industry. Who have you used? Who have you heard of? Who has a great reputation? And you interview them. You go through that same in-depth interview process you would any vendor or any employee. You ask for references, you speak to those references. Like, I want to speak to the CEO of a company you've helped in the last couple of years sell their business. I want to talk to them. Tell me what was good about working with that company. Tell me where they could have done better. Tell me what the outcome was. And then, obviously the terms of the deal, those matter less. I mean, you have to negotiate. Obviously, everything's negotiable, by the way. They're going to say, here's your fee and here's our tail and all of that. And by the way, know that all of that is negotiable. But I'd rather incent them heavily on the high end of the multiple. So if they're quoting me X% for, to sell my business, I'm like, okay, great. I'll pay you X% plus 2 if you sell it for this much. Like, okay, like I'll put incentives on the table for them that they hadn't even thought of.
For the person that's helping you.
For the investment banker trying to help you sell the business. Again, there's always some sort of retainer, but there's usually a commission. There's always a commission for the successful sale of your business. And there's always a tail if you don't consummate that sale right away. So usually it's a year or two where if, God forbid, somebody comes and buys your company without them involved, you still have to pay them the fee for a period of time. So again, all that's negotiable. But I went through an interview process and found the one that I was really comfortable with and really loved working with them. They were great.
I think that's great. The specifically references. So when you're doing reference checks, hiring new employees, generally speaking, the references you get are, you have to work to get good data from reference checks, in my experience.
Yeah. When you call the CEO of a company,
right?
Like anybody calls me, I'm going to give them, right. Like, I'm going to give them the truth.
That's why I bring it up, because it's a different framework for a reference check.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're talking to the founder, owner, CEO, whatever, right, operating person in that company relative to their experience with an investment banker selling the company, you probably get better data points.
Yeah. And then once you've had a successful transaction with one, chances are you're going to go back to that same, that same company, that same, M&A broker, because you know how to work with them. They know how to work with you. You trust them. You see what they've done. If you do multiple transactions.
Mm-hmm. What are the main things that entrepreneurs should look out for when they are going to an investment banker to sell their company?
Well, again, number one is, remember, everything is negotiable, right? Their upfront fee, the retainer, the percent, you want to make 100% sure that obviously their interests are 100% aligned with yours. The other thing is you want to make sure you don't get the bait and switch. So if you're interviewing and you're speaking to the big dog, the partner that has all the connections and you're blown away by what they know about your industry and who could potentially buy you, and like they know more about your company than you do, but then you actually, they give you the team that's going to work with you for the next 6 months, and it's a different team. So be careful of the bait and switch. Make sure that you insist on, I only want to meet with people that are going to be assigned and working on my project. If it's a company that has more than one employee, be careful of the bait and switch.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. Totally. It's scary. And it's super interesting too, because it's very common. I can't speak to investment banking, but anytime you're working with a large financial institution, it's very common to end up with that situation where you get pawned off to an associate or something.
Yeah. I want to be only dealing with, I'll meet you, but I only want to, through this process, I want to meet with the people that are going to be working on my project.
Love it. Beautiful. Great advice. Awesome. I want to hear about your book, man. So Like Clockwork, Run Your Business with Swiss Army Precision.
Yeah.
There are great things about this, but I think before we officially got going, you gave me a very good framework for the book, which I thought was cool. So you grew up in Switzerland.
Yes.
And part of being a Swiss citizen is that you have to be in the military.
We have compulsory military service for all men, yes.
How long were you in the military, and how did that play into the framework of the book?
So, and by the way, the reason I speak with no accent is both of my parents were American. So I moved to Europe when I was 1. My parents moved me to Europe when I was 1. They became Swiss, so I grew up there, local passport, local schools. And again, we have compulsory military service. So after high school, all young Swiss men have to go serve. The way it works is you serve, you go through basic training, which is about 5 months. And if you just remain a soldier, then you just go back like in the reserves 3 weeks every year till you're 30.
Whoa.
It takes 2 years to become an officer, and you go back every 3 weeks until you're 50. So our entire military system is made up of reservists, basically. But we can mobilize about 600,000 men in 24 hours, which makes it a formidable defense force, and right there in the center of Europe, and a very desirable kind of crossroads of north, south, east, west. And by the way, the only country in World War I and World War II that was not invaded not because we were neutral. 5 other countries were neutral on paper in World War II, for example. Germany invaded every single one of them. The only reason they didn't invade Switzerland is we had 400,000 men on the borders ready to defend the country. We can blow up our infrastructure in 2 seconds. You've ever been to Switzerland? It's very mountainous. Very difficult to, move a big land army through Switzerland without going through the mountain pass, all that. But, so I served 2 years, became an officer. And then I came back to the U.S. to go to college and ended up, at one point in Austin to start my first business. What I didn't realize is I was sort of naturally wired or good at building these, what I call people-centered systems and processes to kind of run the different companies that I founded over 30 years. I just assumed that all companies were really good at this until I realized, wow, they're not. And so the book is my way of, I mentioned I'm a mentor at Capital Factory. I love mentoring young entrepreneurs, but I often find myself repeating the sort of same lessons over and over again. So I finally decided, let me actually go write a book where every chapter starts with a story from my time in the Swiss Army, a principle that I learned during that time that I then later applied in running one of the companies that I ran. And then to kind of, give it a more solely rounded, point of view, every chapter has a third-party case study where I interviewed another entrepreneur CEO and how they implemented that same principle at their business. Some are really easy. Once you understand it, you're like, that's obvious. So like chapter 1, by the way, Randy is a case study. Randy Cohen, you mentioned earlier, is a case study in chapter 1 of my book.
Love it.
The first chapter is first day, and it's all about how do you create this amazing experience for your employees on their very first day, first week, first month on the job. For most companies, that's an afterthought. Most companies show up and the receptionist says, hi, who are you? And how can I help you? If you turn that around into making it this immersive, completely engaging, everything is ready for them. There's balloons at their desk. It's a big, you're taking them out to lunch. They get to work immediately that afternoon. Like there's no idle time. You assign them a mentor or an ambassador for that first week, first month, first 3 months. And everything is scripted, right? At home, if they're married or if they have a partner, they get a big, cookie basket that says, welcome to Catapult Systems. We can't wait to see you at the next family event. If you just put a little thought in that, you can make this. And by the way, new employees are nervous.
Yeah.
They made a big decision by joining your company. And that first impression they get of how you have your stuff together or not and how engaging it is going to be very telling for them. Especially young employees these days. And so we curated that entire first experience. And Randy had this great, again, I share his story because I love it. When a new employee would start at Ticket City, he threw a party for them, literally with confetti and margaritas. And the new employees would run down the hall of the company and all the employees were lined up with their hands up in the air like that. And they'd run through high-fiving all the new employees like a star basketball player running into a basketball court. And then he paired them up in 2-day increments with somebody to sit next to and mentor them and show them how it's done here at Ticket City. Like all that leads us amazing. And by the way, his average tenure at Ticket City is 20 years.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So I share that story to just give a different flavor of it. But that's an easy principle to implement because now you've heard it. You're like, you're right. I should make our new employee experience more engaging than it is. Right?
I love that. Well, I like from a structural perspective in the book, I like the idea of military principle applied to business and then case study of some way it's there. And there are a lot of reasons I like that, but I think it's a good structural framework for lots of things that people do in life because you can teach a principle, but if you teach the principle and you don't show it in application in another place, it's very hard for people to latch onto without additional thought. Basically, you're giving them the additional thought versus making them try to figure it out themselves.
Listen, as human beings, I think the way we retain information is through storytelling. If you're a good storyteller, so one of the things I talk about is we had this really, I think, amazing employee onboarding program where about a month or 45 days into them joining the company, we had a Catapult boot camp. I called it boot camp, obviously, from my military background, where it was 2 to 4 days, depending on the department they joined. And day 1, I taught personally. I put combat fatigues on, red beret, and it was all day cultural indoctrination. And pretty much all day what I did was tell stories. Tell the origin story of Catapult and how we got started and what the idea was and how we grew. And this is, and then I talk about our core values and I tell stories around every single one of them and examples. We talk about our golden rules of customer service in the afternoon. And this is how we've codified our best practices. And everything was a story. Like to just tell you, you only have one chance to make a first impression. That's great. But I'll tell you a story where somebody botched that. Mm-hmm. And it's going to crystallize it in your memory. So my goal with the book was every chapter is a story. It's a real story. Nothing's made up. It may or may not apply to your business. You have to choose, but it's a story.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I think you've got 30 chapters and 30 years of entrepreneurial experience to back that up. Entrepreneurship is sexier than it's ever been. There are more people leaning in that direction than ever before. And I think that's going to continue with this, with the wave of AI, with
I agree.
The wave of, one-person companies coming.
I agree.
What advice do you have for a 25-year-old entrepreneur getting started today?
Wow. First of all, there's never been a better time, in my opinion. There's never been a better time. All the tools are there if you just dig a little bit, right? You don't need a big HR department. We don't need a lawyer. I mean, it helps have lawyers sometimes, but all these tools on how to get started with the business, you can go incorporate with Zen Business to this afternoon and have this whole framework for getting started. My advice is, and I do speaking at high schools and colleges, is always the same. Start sooner than you think. Start sooner rather than later. It is so much easier to start a business because you have to be willing to risk everything. That is still the common denominator here. And entrepreneurs are different than employees because they're willing to risk everything, right? Your tolerance for risk has to be really high because chances are you're going to fail and have to start over and fail again and start over again. So when you're young and don't have that big mortgage or that family yet and those mouths to feed and that college tuition to save for, you really have nothing to lose. Why not start now? You don't need to wait 10 years in your industry to go just launch into something new. And you have this now amazing thought partner with artificial intelligence that we never had back in the day. I had my Oppenheimer moment 6-8 months ago. I'm mentoring I meet for the first time for office hours at Capital Factory with a young entrepreneur, Griffin. And he's telling me the story for what his company does. And I think I'm in an episode of South Park. I look around and go, okay, I'm being punked right now because surely this is not, this can't be real. And I'll tell you what it is. He's doing it, by the way. He's building basically this device that you put on dairy cows to capture the methane from their burps. And I'm thinking, cow burps? Really? Who's punking me right now? And I'm thinking, okay, keep talking. And he's like, this is a big problem, blah, blah, blah. I mean, literally he's beginning to convince me with all these numbers. I'm like, okay, so you have a background in agrotech, surely. And he's like, no, I'm the number one salesperson for a roofing company across the US. I'm like, okay, so how'd you come up with the idea? I was like, well, I was using AI as a thought partner. And I put in these parameters, and over the course of 2 weeks, we went back and forth and back and forth. I want to solve a big problem that has been solved before, and I want it to be this and be eco-friendly. And we came up with this together. And I'm going, okay, it's a new world. You mean it's not that you're using AI as a tool, to help write code or your emails, or it's a true thought partner now that helped you came up with the idea for this company. And then I'm like, okay, well, you have to have a background in engineering to build this thing. It's like, not at all. It's like, well, how are you going to build it? It's like, well, I worked with AI on that. And AI suggested that I put this very carefully crafted, thing out on LinkedIn to look for, partners to come help me build this thing. I have 10 PhDs that volunteer their time for free just for a piece of the pie because they believe in the cause so much that they're willing to help me engineer this thing. I'm like, okay, this is a new world.
Wild.
And he's actually doing it now.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love that. Well, big ups to Capital Factory and you for mentoring.
Yeah.
Love that. Sam, it's been great talking, man. I appreciate you coming out.
Such a pleasure.
where do you want to point people? You find the book coming out.
Yeah, the book comes out September 9th.
Great.
Amazon, I'm warning you, I recorded in my own voice. So if you download the Audible version of it, it's in this voice. But yeah, hardback, paperback on Amazon September 9th. If you want to find out about it or sign up for, free chapters, you can go to samgoodner.com. That's the website for the book. And find out all about it. You'll see, a bunch of chapters in there. But yeah, samgoodner.com or September 9th, Amazon. Like Clockwork.
Love it. Sam, thanks so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Beyond a Million. If you liked the podcast, you should probably click the bell and subscribe, and maybe leave a comment below. That helps other people find us and keeps this flywheel going. And the more people that find us, the better guests that we can get on the show. So if you could take 30 seconds to do those things, it would be amazing.